So I called a couple of people. They immediately met me. We had coffee. We had an idea about starting a recovery center here in the city. We said the next time we'll meet, we're going to meet in a church basement on one of the side streets over here. And we wanted to let people know that we were going to have this meeting and we were looking for volunteers. And I had a great idea on how to build a recovery center. I thought I had the secret sauce, so to speak. I go to the first meeting in the church basement, and a gentleman walks in a suit and a tie. He sits down at the table. There were about a dozen of us there. And he immediately pretty much takes over the meeting. And I'm thinking, well, this is great. I don't know who this guy is. Maybe he's from the Bank of New Hampshire or New Hampshire Ball Bearing and has got a passion for recovery. And I'm listening to him. And JJ, you were there at the first meeting as well. You knew Phil. And as the meeting went on, all of a sudden I realized that person was Phil. That person was so smart, so articulate, so passionate about helping others, so open about his journey of recovery. My head sort of exploded, quite frankly, in a very good way. And I had to meet him right after the meeting, and of course, he hugs me. And from that moment on, it's like Phil was my best friend. In a strange way, though we would go periods of time without seeing each other. And what I also realized from people like JJ, like Jeff, like Phil, is the great idea that I thought I had for a recovery center, it was junk. They knew it, they told me. I was at that moment, just a split second of sanity to listen to them, and I'm so glad that I did. Because they were the people that should have been leading this charge. They knew what it was like to struggle with addiction, to bump into obstacles, to go to jail, to not be able to find a job when they get out, the struggles they had in finding sober living. They really brought what was important to this and built what I do think is a very successful recovery organization here in the city. It was Phil, it was Jeff, it was all of the people in the recovery community that taught me. And for that, I will always be grateful to have had that lesson and to be in some small way a part of this organization and this community. And thank you for accepting me and being patient with me as well. Next up, where's Charlie? Come on up, Charlie.
I'm kind of regretting wearing the black on black, but how can I sum up a complex man like Phil? Real words can describe the link he went to help people in this community and to change their lives for the better. When I first met Phil, I was working for his sister Lori and Mike Townsend 15, 20 years ago. He had a certain spark about him. Whatever he did it all the way, whether it was for good or bad. Years ago, Phil stayed with me briefly. We were both at a pretty low point in our lives. If you had told me years later I'll be managing a sober house and he'd be elected to the State House of Representatives, I would have thought you were crazy. I probably thought you were on drugs too. Phil did the impossible, going from rock bottom to having nothing to hundreds of thousands of people voting for him into office. He showed me anything was possible. Like Phil says, what's right is right. He fought for those who could barely fight for themselves at times and would not accept no for an answer. Phil really helped my transition when I moved back to Laconia from Nashua by letting me manage one of his sober houses. It was a huge part of my recovery. It always will be. It was nerve-wracking coming back to a place that was hell for so many years for me. If it wasn't for Phil, I don't know if my transition would have been possible. Phil always was challenging people to do better and to be better. He held his head high and was proud to be in recovery. While managing his sober house, I had responsibilities of kicking people out and At times, this one time I kicked this kid out. Next thing I know, it's like 11 o'clock at night. The morning police are knocking on the door, demanding to see my phone, accusing me of these crazy things. I called Phil. He was there, he was like a flash. He was there in seconds, literally seconds. He was fighting for me, standing up for me, fighting for me like he was fighting for himself. He always did the next right thing, regardless of if it benefited him or not. After that incident, he called me every morning, making sure I was okay. You could hear the compassion in his voice every time I talked to him, just not even those mornings. He was constantly bringing guys from the sober house to the grocery store. At times, most times, paying out of his pocket for their food, so they wouldn't go hungry. I remember another responsibility was for me to collect rent. I remember this one Friday collecting rent, and this one certain kid didn't have it. And I called Phil up. I said, hey, he doesn't have rent again. You want me to kick him out? I was kind of hoping he'd say, yeah, I wasn't a big fan of him. That's just personal reasons, whatever. He paused for a minute, and he said, he kind of sighed. He said, give him some more time. He's doing so well that I don't want to see him go backwards. That's the kind of guy Phil was. Truly making a difference. He was a huge influence, not only in his kids' lives, but he impacted the whole community. He made a ripple effect. And though I can never fill his shoes, like Mike Townsend said, I can carry the torch that has been passed on and keep his legacy alive. For what he left behind is a legacy. He will always be missed in our hearts. Thank you everyone for coming out today.
Thanks, Charlie. Next up, we have Congressman Chris Pappas to share a couple of words.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to join you all here today. And first, I just want to start by saying to Phil's family, to his mom, his extended family, Nina, and everyone who is here who is touched by Phil's life. I am so sorry for your loss. We know that Phil's memory is with you. But I do know that the community and the extended community beyond Laconia is with you all. And we want to do all we can to continue to keep Phil's legacy alive and ensure that others can be touched by it. Phil was a good man. We've heard a little bit about those who knew him best, and his life had profound meaning. Like all of us, I was so shocked by Phil's death in June. He was truly a remarkable man, and from his early years and his passion for hockey to training as a chef and working in the restaurant business, I know that's no easy feat. He loved telling me a little bit more about that. And his ability to overcome addiction and to become a champion for others around him and those who are in recovery is not lost on anyone who is here. He knew that life was precious, and he helped share that with others to make the most of the time that we have on this earth. I was with Phil in Laconia in the home stretch of the campaign in 2020. I think we were in Carlos's yard, literally giving speeches on a stump in the yard. And Phil was his usual self, full of optimism about what was to come, and just had this innate sense of purpose about the job that he was there to do. Not just in politics, but more largely about the way that he could touch people's lives. In addition to his work in the recovery community, we know Phil was a dedicated public servant, served his time in the legislature, and brought the voices of his constituents to bear as a member of the House. And really, his voice was essential because it involved his lived experience, and he ensured that individuals like him who have that experience had a seat at the table, so that good policy decisions could be made not just by people in Concord or Washington who were removed from the pain of everyday life, but for those who have actually lived it. That's the beauty of our citizen legislature, and Phil lived up to that model, certainly, with his work. I think his life holds lessons for all of us, lessons of recovery and redemption, of second chances, of justice, and certainly of hope. I know I'll miss him a lot. I used to get lots of phone calls from Phil, I think as we all did. He would always have a new project. a new way of trying to help others. Was really excited about inviting me to come to Laconia and see his handiwork. And more than anything, every time he called, he would have an ask. And sometimes it would just be to show up. Sometimes it would be to advocate for funding for some initiative that he was involved in that was making a difference in people's lives. And I never wanted to let Phil down. I think we all wanted to do what we could to support Phil, to support his recovery certainly, but to support the work that he was doing that was just so important for others. It's not going to be easy moving forward, and I know for his family and those who are close to him, it's one day at a time. But I hope we can take a page from Phil's book, because as the saying goes, this thing called failure is not about falling down, but the act of staying down. And Phil didn't stay down. He may have fallen during his life, but he got back up. And he knew that we were all in this together. And I think those are some qualities that we all have to take to heart and work to embody in our own experiences. In his obituary in the paper, Phil's family concluded with a call to action, and it was great to hear Mike say some additional steps of what we could do to help support Phil's mission and uplift causes that were near and dear to his heart. We all have to be a part of that effort. And I just hope as we move forward that his memory continues to be with all of us, that it truly is eternal, and that we do all we can to make sure his example continues to have value, continues to have relevance, and really continues to change people's lives. That's exactly what Phil did in his all too short time on this earth. And he's someone I know I'll never forget, and I'm sure you all feel the same way about him. May God bless Phil.
Thank you, Congressman. Next up is our good friend and passionate advocate for the recovery community, Senator Maggie Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mayor Hosmer, friend Andrew, for that introduction. I'm really sorry we're gathering here for this purpose today, but I am so glad to see all of you. I'm really, really privileged to be a part of this celebration of the life of an incredible, incredible Granite Stater, our friend Phil. And I want to begin by acknowledging Phil's family, including his mom, his partner Anina, his children Gabrielle, Dominic, and Gemma. To all of Phil's loved ones and friends, I know that his loss is unimaginable. As we've heard today, Phil was deeply proud of and dedicated to all of you. At the same time, your love and support helped fill him with a sense of purpose, giving him strength in his own life, and as he took on extraordinary work to improve the lives around him. Please know that we're gathered here today to offer our support and our condolences to you to continue to face this loss. And it's also fitting that we look back and celebrate Phil's life and his many, many accomplishments, and to recognize the really powerful impact that he had on people all throughout New Hampshire. You know, you can go all over the state. When you do, it's common to find people whose lives, in one way or another, have been affected by the wide-reaching impacts of the devastating substance misuse crisis. Phil was one of those people. After grappling with the challenge of substance use disorder for years, Phil was given a lifeline and was able to overcome his own struggles through his hard work and dedication and the support of a rehabilitation program. Phil worked tirelessly at his recovery, and as he was doing it, he saw an opportunity to give back. He knew that he could provide guidance and a helping hand to those who experienced the same struggles that he did. And he knew that through his own experience, he could help inform decisions that impact the entire recovery community. And it was through that work that Phil started Navigating Recovery, which provides vital support for people in Laconia and throughout the Lakes region. He also helped open sober houses in the region and even became a certified recovery coach himself. I still remember what I think was my first phone call with Phil. Phone rang, I saw it was his name on the screen. I forget where I was, but I ended up needing to stop and pull out my notebook and start taking notes because Phil had instructions. And he was getting a sober house reopened, and he was very polite and respectful, but he was not taking a bureaucratic answer for 1 minute. One of the things that Phil really helped me internalize to the extent I could was that as the opioid epidemic escalated in New Hampshire, when I started as governor in January of 13, and my priority then was kind of mental health challenges writ large. Our system was just in terrible shape. And then over the next year, as the opioid deaths mounted, we began to shift to focus specifically on substance misuse. And Phil was basically saying to me, fentanyl is killing people so fast, you don't have time. You don't have time to think through every bureaucratic requirement of what the physical structure of a recovery house or a sober house looks like. You need to get people inside, you need to get them with their peers, you need to get them help, and you need to do it yesterday. And he was so clear. And it was, he was so clear to those of us who haven't struggled with addiction that telling somebody who's ready to take that next step towards recovery to wait 3 weeks for an open bed was just not an option. Through all of this work, he became a leader in the recovery community. He also became someone that public officials like me turned to when we were needing advice and guidance into how to respond to the crisis. But he knew there was more work to do, not just on the policy front, but he knew that the policies would never change enough. We would never get fully better if we didn't break down the barriers that come with the stigma around addiction. It was with that in mind that he ran for public office and became a state representative. And as you heard Mike say, went to that meeting in Canterbury and was very frank about who he was, where he had been, and what his hopes and dreams were, and how he had been able to change, and so could we. While he served as a state legislator, and in his subsequent runs for office, he brought such an important perspective to the table as someone in recovery. He brought his experiences and the experience of those he coached to the table to inform policy decisions and to fight for change. But perhaps even more importantly, Phil showed people across our state what is possible through recovery. He was also frank about the reality of relapse, a reality that is true with any disease, right? He helped challenge the preconceived notions and stereotypes that way too many people carry for those who experience substance use disorder. He helped break down the stigma of addiction, and he served as a role model for countless people. Phil once said it best, this is a quote, "I ran for office to show others what I can do." And another quote, "The truth is, we can achieve great things." Phil Spagnuolo was a person who touched the lives of so many of us. He fought back from challenges in his life. He turned those challenges into something positive for this community and the entire Granite State. And he worked tirelessly, as we have heard from the previous speakers, to improve the lives of others in any way he could. Sometimes it's a policy change, sometimes it's just a bed when you need a roof over your head. Always it's friendship and care. While Phil is no longer with us, I have no doubt that his legacy will live on. Look at this today and know the ripple effect that not only Phil has, but everybody here has in order to help us get better and change. Phil's legacy is going to live on through his family and all of those who loved him. It will live on in places like Navigating Recovery and through all the people that he helped to support. It will live on through his essential work to break down the stigma of addiction and mental health challenges generally. I am so grateful for all that Phil did on our behalf of the state, and I'm so grateful to be able to be here today to learn more about his impact. I just want to say one last thing. I'm a United States Senator, and people often come to me and thank me for having tried to get more funding for treatment and recovery, for bringing attention to the issue of opioid addiction and substance misuse generally. I'm a champion because people like Phil made me their champion. Phil stood up and he told me he counted and he mattered, as every single person does. It is easy to be a champion when you have a Phil showing you the progress that he can make and the progress that we can all make. It's really important to remember that, because the more that the people in the recovery community have spoken up, the more you have shared your stories, the more you follow Phil's example, the better off we're going to get. And we're going to get to a place where substance use disorder is like any other disease, where doctors from all perspectives and all specialties know about it, know how to treat it, understand that relapses happen, but stay with their patients, because it's a disease like anything else that can be dealt with, that can be managed, and more than anything, can shine a light on the human spirit and what is possible when we care for each other. That's Phil's legacy. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Senator Hassan. You all can see through those remarks how fortunate we are to have her as our United States Senator. And finally, as far as the formal speaking portion, I'd like to call up Anina Hansen to share a few words.
Hi everyone, I'm Anina. I'm an alcoholic. I'm the woman who got to share the last couple of years of Phil's life with him. And I'm a writer, and I often wrote down things he said because he had many quotable quotes. So I want to speak to his story today as I experienced it through his words. And if you think some of them seem very long, we talked on the phone a lot when we weren't together, and if I was at my laptop, I would actually type while he was talking, like trying to keep up with stuff that was coming out of his mouth. So it's all verbatim. Phil's words of wisdom, number 1, what about all these people who can't advocate for themselves? I'm a persistent asshole. I'll be all right. I'll figure something out. But what about them? That's what got this all started for me. And that really was Phil's mentality always. He would make a